If you've ever caught yourself saying sorry before anyone even looks upset, you're not alone. Sorry for the late reply. Sorry, quick question. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. Sorry, I'm probably overthinking. And what's strange is, half the time, nothing actually happened. Nobody accused you of anything. Nobody demanded an apology. It doesn't look like a big deal. It even looks polite. But chronic apologizing usually isn't about manners, it's about safety. It's a quiet personality pattern built around one question. How do I make sure this doesn't turn into conflict? Because for some people, sorry isn't just a word, it's a reflex. It's the verbal version of making yourself smaller before the world has a chance to push you down. You can see it in tiny, everyday micro-behaviors. The way you soften your opinions before you say them. I could be wrong, but I don't know if this makes sense. Sorry if this is a dumb question. The way you reread texts 3 times because one sentence might come off too direct. The way you apologize for taking up space, standing in someone's way for half a second, needing clarification, asking for help, having an emotion, having a preference. Sometimes you'll even apologize when someone else bumps into you. And it sounds irrational when you say it out loud, but emotionally, it makes perfect sense, because the apology is doing something. It's scanning the room and making a quick calculation. What's the fastest way to lower the temperature here? For the always apologizing personality, sorry often becomes a conflict prevention tool. Not because you're weak, not because you're dramatic, because you learned somewhere along the line that harmony depended on you staying careful, staying agreeable, staying easy to be around. So the apology isn't really an admission of guilt, it's an attempt to control the emotional weather. And once you start seeing it like that, the pattern gets deeper. Because chronic apologizing is rarely about the moment you're in. It's usually about an older memory your nervous system still believes it's living inside. A lot of chronic apologizers grew up in environments where small mistakes didn't stay small. Maybe a caregiver's mood could flip without warning. Maybe there was yelling, silent treatment, unpredictable reactions, criticism that felt personal. Or maybe it was subtler than that. No screaming, no obvious chaos, just the sense that love was conditional. That being easy got you warmth, and being difficult got you distance. In that kind of world, you learn something early. Your safest position is preemptive repair. You apologize quickly, not because you're always wrong, but because being wrong felt dangerous. So you become the person who brings the tension down before it has a name, the person who smooths things over, the person who reads faces, the person who adjusts. And the apology becomes a signal you send to other people. I'm not a threat. I'm not here to challenge you. I'm manageable. That's why sorry shows up even when you're just existing. Because for some people, existing was something you had to justify. There's also a specific kind of over-responsibility that lives inside this pattern. It's the feeling that if someone is uncomfortable, it must somehow be your fault. If someone is quiet, you wonder what you did. If someone is stressed, you start compensating, talking less, offering more, apologizing preemptively. And it can look like empathy. It can even look like emotional intelligence. But underneath is often a childhood role, the emotional regulator. The kid who learned to keep the peace. Not necessarily because anyone told them to, but because peace was the only time the house felt safe. So you got good at preventing explosions. And then you grow up, and you're in a normal situation. Someone sends a short text, someone sighs, someone seems distracted, and your body reacts like you're back in that old room. Your mind fills in the missing pieces. You apologize because your system believes you're stopping something. That's why it's so hard to just stop saying sorry, even when you logically know you don't need to. Because it's not a logic problem, it's a safety habit. And here's another layer people don't always expect. Chronic apologizing can be a way of managing other people's power. When you apologize first, you're not just being polite, you're taking the role of the one who's at fault.
which means you're also taking the role of the one who's trying to fix it. And weirdly, that can feel more controllable than waiting to find out what the other person thinks. In a tense moment, the unknown is the scariest part. So apologizing becomes a way to remove uncertainty. It's like saying, let's skip the part where you decide if I'm bad. I'll go ahead and decide for you. That might sound harsh, but it's often unconscious. And it can feel like humility, but it's closer to self-protection.
Because if you blame yourself first, you don't have to wait for someone else to blame you. If you criticize yourself first, no one can surprise you with criticism. If you take up less space, you don't have to deal with the consequences of taking up space. And that's where the identity impact starts to form. Because over time, constant apologizing quietly shapes the story you tell about who you are. Not in a dramatic way, in small, repeated messages. I'm too much. I'm in the way. I'm not easy. I'm a burden. I'm always the one who has to make it right. And eventually, even neutral situations start to feel like you're at risk of being disliked. So you become careful with your personality, careful with your needs, careful with your honesty. You may even become so practiced at smoothing things that you don't realize you're doing it until you're alone and exhausted. Because constantly apologizing isn't just a social habit, it's emotional labor. It's monitoring, predicting, adjusting. It's living with a low-level sense that something could go wrong at any moment, and it would be your job to fix it. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people think chronic apologizing is about low confidence, like they just don't believe in themselves. But the real reason often isn't confidence, it's control. Not in a manipulative way, control in a nervous system way. When you grow up around unpredictable reactions, you become attached to strategies that make people predictable. And sorry is a powerful strategy for that. Because apologies tend to do something immediately. They soften faces, they reduce intensity, they signal submission, they invite reassurance. Sometimes you don't even want the reassurance, you just want the tension gone. So the apology becomes less about the event and more about managing the emotional atmosphere. And that's why some chronic apologizers feel strangely uncomfortable around people who are calm. Because calm creates space, and space creates uncertainty. If nobody is upset, you don't know what role to play. You don't know what's expected of you. So you over-explain, you double-check, you apologize anyway, just to keep the rules clear. Another unexpected part of this pattern is what happens when someone finally does get upset. A person who apologizes constantly often has a hard time tolerating other people's normal emotions. Not because they're selfish, but because anger, disappointment, or frustration can feel like danger, even when it's mild, even when it's reasonable, even when it's temporary. So the apology becomes a way to end the emotion quickly, to erase it, to return everything to okay. But the deeper pattern is that you learned other people's feelings were your responsibility, which is a heavy thing to carry into adulthood. Because adult relationships are supposed to hold complexity. Someone can be annoyed and still care about you. Someone can disagree and still respect you. Someone can have a bad day and it not be about you at all. But if your early world taught you that negative emotion meant disconnection, you'll instinctively do whatever restores connection fastest, even if that means shrinking yourself. And over time, people can start responding to you in ways that reinforce the pattern. Some people will reassure you constantly, no, you're fine, stop apologizing, which sounds kind, but it also keeps you in the role of the one who's always at risk. Other people will get impatient. Why are you apologizing? That's annoying, which can feel like proof that you were too much all along. And then there are people who take advantage because someone who apologizes first is easy to blame, easy to guilt, easy to push. So the pattern doesn't just live inside you, it becomes a social identity you perform. The peacemaker, the low-maintenance one, the one who never makes it hard. And from the outside, it can look like you're just kind, but inside, it can feel like you're constantly negotiating your right to be here. None of this means apologizing is bad. There are real apologies that come from integrity, when you genuinely caused harm,
when you recognize impact, when you want to repair. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of apology that happens before you even know whether you did anything. The apology that shows up when you ask for a napkin. The apology that slips out when you speak in a meeting. The apology that tries to make your presence easier to tolerate. That one is usually not about politeness, it's about history. And when you look at it that way, the always apologizing personality stops looking like a flaw. It starts looking like a survival language, a way you stayed connected, a way you stayed safe, a way you reduced risk in environments where being disliked had consequences. So if you recognize yourself in this, the most honest way to name it is this: your nervous system learned that the fastest path to peace was making yourself responsible for everything. And once you see that, you start noticing how often sorry isn't coming from your character, it's coming from your conditioning. It was never random, it was a pattern. A conflict prevention reflex shaped by a time when harmony depended on you staying small. And awareness doesn't magically erase a reflex, but it does change the way you understand it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if this explains something for you, there's more to uncover, because these little patterns are rarely little. They're usually the most honest biography we have.